Welcome to a special conversation, a special edition and conversation on Father's Day and what Father's Day means in our community. Today we have Olivia S. Benson, attorney Olivia S. Benson, author, lawyer, speaker, teacher. Welcome, Olivia.
Hey, I'm back. Thank you for having me.
Well, well, Olivia, I tell you, do you prefer attorney or just Olivia?
Olivia.
Okay.
Olivia. hmm
I was, reading sections of your book and just getting a sense of it in terms of Father's Day. I did a little research on Father's Day and Father's Day and Mother's Day, for example. And
hmm
there was Mother's Day, of course, right?
hmm
And the lady who actually um, created or initiated Mother's Day really intended it to honor mothers and the unique and challenges that existed from being a mother.
hmm
She eventually disavowed the holiday because it became so commercial.
Mm.
Yeah. And Father's Day came along a lot later, and I think half of it stimulated by the commercial success of Mother's Day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I think about Father's Day, so often people talk about it. But let's think about that. Uh, I know as a father myself and with sons, I don't know that we really have a perspective of what Father's Day. I don't get that sense that it's a day to honor fathers, although we interpret it that way. Mother's Day is so well grounded in flowers and candy, and you know when on Mother's Day you go to every restaurant in town is full.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
not the same on Father's Day.
Yeah, it is different. It's like, when I've always noticed like when successful athletes have a successful event or something, and then they'll come up and, interview them. And, so many times it's about mom.
Hmm.
Not always, but sort of like in the same vein that you're talking about Father's Day, very often it's about mom and the sacrifices that she made. And I
Yes.
don't think it's because there are no dads that were amazing and wonderful, but it's a very being a father, depending on what you place emphasis on, is very different than what it is to be a mother and to
Mm,
bear a child. You
mm,
know, to actually, like I always make a joke, it's like, if you had a growth, right?
mm.
And the growth was and that you had an operation and they removed the growth and you put it in a jar, you know what it is? It's your growth, right?
Mm,
So it's just like birthing a child, it's your child. There's just no question about that birthing.
mhm,
Whereas because the process of fatherhood can be sort of more distant, so to
mhm,
speak, then it's probably a little bit easier for some men, not all men, because there's some
mhm.
wonderful men out there that even though they haven't born a child, they love their child or kids beyond all measure. But because I think of the biology of it's a little bit easier for men to not be as for some men to not be as connected to a child. And I think that that is part of the thing. Because, I mean, if you bear a child, it's very, very connected to you. I like to say that, and it's actually true for both, but
Mhm.
you can see it more clearly with women. Like you bear a child, you bring a child into the world, and there's an invisible cord that forever connects you to this being. It's
Yeah,
invisible, but it's
yes,
there.
yes.
Mhm.
And it's visible and tangible. But as you were sharing that, in the street vernacular, it says, "Mama's baby, daddy's maybe."
Yes, mamas for sure. Mamas for sure. Not even
Yeah,
a question.
yeah, yeah,
Yes. So yeah. So
yeah,
that's a thing.
yeah.
But we're advancing, and like everything else in life, I think as the human race, which is in reality the only race that exists is human.
Mhm,
I think we are moving forward slowly
mhm,
sometimes,
mhm,
but we are moving forward in terms of how we see things. Because just because you didn't have to push the child out
mhm,
doesn't mean that you can't understand the depth of the connection that
yeah,
you have with this soul,
yeah,
and understand that invisible cord that
yeah,
ties you. Even though you kind of just drop the sperm, there is still an invisible cord that ties you to this being for their entire life and for your entire life.
yes. Well, when you look at it from that perspective, there is a physical chain
Hmm.
back to the first woman. In other
Absolutely.
words, that when you read those sections of the Bible, that this one begot that one begot the
Mhm.
other one, there's a physical chain. So there's a physical, tangible relationship between mothers.
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I think that creates a different vibration. It's almost like there's a definiteness of motherhood wherein
Hmm.
there's a possibility of
The
fatherhood.
fatherhood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Unfortunately, now we have the technology. So there is DNA, because I mean, as a man, I imagine as being a man, I cannot imagine what it's like to get to, let's say, 60, 70, 80 years old, and then have to sit and wonder
mm,
if you ever engendered a child in one of those relationships that you might have had along the way. I can only imagine that that is I mean, you do what you have to do to survive mentally, right? So you can tell yourself whatever story you need to say.
yeah.
But you, as a man, know that you were in some circumstances where you could have engendered a child, right? And you don't know where that child is. That's a thing. For me, that's a thing
Yeah,
to live with.
yeah. Well, my old law partner at yeah, he must have been like 65 years old.
Hmm.
And a lady one day, with the advent of the internet, a
Hmm.
lady showed up
Hmm. Hmm.
who who said she was his daughter. She contacted him on the internet.
Hmm.
And when they met, with it, like when you talk about physical appearance, was no doubt.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I remember he said, I asked him, I said, "Well, did you have a DNA?" And he said that when they talked it through, he was convinced they never did do a physical DNA,
Mhm, mhm,
but
mhm,
he was convinced that that was it. She went back. He was in the military, going off. He had a
mhm,
girlfriend, and it was not a one night stand, but it was no more than just a few times. So very
mhm,
casual. The
mhm,
lady never reached out to him. He never went back there. He
mhm,
was just passing through the town.
mhm, mhm,
But evidently the mother kept, his mind and attempt wanted to find him, and the internet gave him the facility to do it.
mhm, mhm,
And it brought an entirely new dimension to his life. And so when I saw that, it
mhm,
really made me think back because in my young life, you know, I had some early success.
mhm,
And, like marriage and kids were the last thing on my mind. I
mhm.
was out there in the world, just being
Doing
some,
it, just doing
yeah,
it.
doing it. And so after that experience with him, I did wonder that same question. And every now and then, like it comes up. And let me tell you, man, one of my friends told me, he said he went to a funeral. We all went to school together.
Mhm,
And he went to a lady's funeral, and one of her daughters said to him, she said, "Our son would be 40 years old now."
uh-uh.
And
Wow.
and that guy has never recovered from it. because, this
Mm-mm.
was in the era when abortions were not common, when it was a
Mhm.
real and evidently she was a teacher.
Mhm.
Seemed like she was a teacher, something in that era where
Right.
you didn't get pregnant without being married,
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and he really it changed the trajectory of his life
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
he didn't have any other kids.
Ooh. Ooh, that's
He
tough. And you
yeah,
see, that's the thing because, sometimes as humans, we think that if there's no physical evidence or so to speak, physical consequences, we've sort of gotten away with something. But in the universe, everything is energy, right?
yeah, yes,
Just like, God is energy, we are all energy. And the thing about it is that you might never have a physical consequence that you know of, but there's some energy imbalance going on. If you
yeah,
engendered a child, that energy is out there. Your
yes,
energy is out there. In
yes,
and it's gonna have, because in my view, we live in a cause and effect universe without any question.
yes,
It's not, like you're gonna get punishment after death or whatever. And
mm,
sometimes if you don't get your consequence or the result of an action that you took, it's going to show up in the next generation.
yes, yes,
There is no question about it. And so you have to realize, and I always say to myself, I just don't understand why people don't wear, why guys particularly don't wear a condom. I don't
uh-huh,
understand
yes,
because the impact, it's bad enough for the women,
yes,
right? That you might be pregnant and that this guy is not showing up. But if you're a guy, if you just look at what you're going to go through with the child support system,
yes,
that's destroying your life.
yes,
You're going to be
yes,
chased down by the government day and night to make this payment with somebody who you don't even like.
yes,
And now your life has changed because of something that you did without understanding the depth. And I see many, many, particularly, well, not particularly, but disproportionately, I see many men of African descent who have not been able to make the progress that they could have made
uh-huh,
because of the children that they're having.
yes,
I mean, I
yeah,
remember I was in Central America, and the taxi driver was driving, and I was talking to him. Oh, I have 4 kids, and I have this, and I have this. I said, how are you ever going to make progress if you have 4 kids with 4 different women?
yes,
How can you make progress?
yes, yes,
You can't progress. You're gonna
yes,
the life. I mean, it's economies of scale, right? If you were in one house with one woman
yes,
and 4 kids, now you could maybe do
yes,
something. But if
yes,
you have one here and child support there and this one's that, you
yeah,
can't
yeah,
advance. So it's still detrimental
yeah,
to men.
yes. Well, from a man's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot like, Jacob and Esau
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And Esau, the idea of that that the feeling gets the blessing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that whatever you feel determines so much of how you act. So, and it may even be incorrect, when Jacob's wife was deceiving him with this soup that
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
liked. Soup is like a sense of a physical
Right.
thing that you
Right.
like,
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
that he had to give the blessing to someone else,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
give it to Jacob. And so many times men are driven by the feeling, that
Mm-hmm.
there are 4 stages in life. The first stage, the stage of education; the second stage, the stage of sensation; the third stage, the stage of power; and then the
Mm-hmm.
fourth stage, the stage of immortality.
Mm-hmm.
And that second stage, that stage of feeling, can
Mm-hmm.
be so profound that it dominates. Many men never get over that.
Yes, you
You
just
know,
stay right there.
just stay right there. You think about
Mhm,
Bill Clinton. Now
mhm,
he was a really an incredibly successful president. did
Mm-hmm.
lots of things, interesting, good things.
Mm-hmm.
But you remember nothing about that other than that whole Monica Lewinsky piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was clear that even though he had risen to great power, he
Mm-hmm.
still had not solved that riddle of sensation, that
Right.
drive,
Right.
and
The
and
physicality. The physicality.
physicality. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I don't think most men think about the impact, it's all about the feeling.
Right.
I watch a lot of the paternity shows, and
Oh, so do
you know,
I.
yes, yeah, and and I think it just shows something. It's like, do people really think like that? But the guys, well, I don't like condoms. It doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't feel the same. So there's no thought of the impact. Well, one, the legal ramifications and all of that, but in a more personal level, the
Yes.
impact on the child. You know,
Yes. Yes.
another child without a father, and it's a it's a it's an incredible dilemma that we fall into so easily.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to say I wanted to say this about the paternity shows because the guy will come and then in the show he's like, "Oh, well she's crazy and she's this and he's gone because he can't take it." And I'm saying to myself, "Listen, if you think that she's crazy
Mhm,
and you had a child with her,
mhm,
why would you leave your child with a crazy girl or a crazy woman? Why? If you're running, how do you leave a little innocent child with this crazy person that you say
mm,
is crazy? I'm not saying she is, but I'm just saying
right.
you say she's crazy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now you have to run. But
yeah,
this being that you brought into the world, you think it's okay for that child to stay with the woman that you swear is crazy and
yeah,
sometimes really is crazy when you hear,
yeah,
they
yeah,
slashed my tires, they did
yeah.
this, they did that, whatever the case might be. How do you engender a child and then leave them with a person who you honestly believe, whether she is or not, but you honestly believe that she's not right?
Wow. Yeah. That's some high level thinking. You know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
level. Well, it's thinking with a purpose of, like, when people understand that we are here for a holy purpose, that God created
Yes.
each and every one of us, and
Yes.
therefore, if we're here for a purpose, then how does what we're doing, further that purpose or undermine that
Exactly.
purpose?
Yes.
Or wow. But
Yeah.
I was looking in your book, when we look at these behaviors,
Yes.
and you say, well, why? What
Hmm.
is it? How does this come about?
Hmm.
And it's not, we're not going to paint with a broad brush and say all and this
Right.
never happens, but just from the point of view of, it happens enough that we need to pay attention to it.
Amen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how does this all come about? How is it that men are just as callous, or is it just a learned behavior?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think it was very important that you said we're not painting a broad brush because it's not all of anyone, right?
Mm,
And to before I get into what I'm going to say, listen, there are many, many, many men of African descent who are very well healed.
mhm.
I'm saying this in advance of what I'm saying. From, for example, um, what I call the effects of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes.
Okay, there are many. Also, African American men and men of African descent are not the only ones who have issues with fatherhood. There are many
Mm,
across the board.
mm,
Now, however, in my book, being a person of African descent, I focused in on men of African descent because I can see a pattern of behavior.
mm,
And I can see a pattern of behavior that had an impact in my
mm.
life.
Yes.
And I, as you know, by reading the book, by the way, here's the book, everybody, For the Love of My Father, available on Amazon.
Yes.
And soon in audio, it'll be available in audio also. And I looked at my dad, and I think my dad, and I say it in the book, I think my dad was very handsome, and he apparently thought so too.
Okay. Yes, yes.
He didn't think so. And I don't know what could have been his life because my grandparents, both sets of grandparents, were very working class people. Nobody had finished secondary education. Nobody
Okay.
went to high school. They did maybe sixth grade and this and that and the other, but not. And my paternal grandparents had like 8 children. It was 8 of them in total. I think no, 8 children. So it was 10 mouths to feed, and my dad was the first. And I look at it and I say, when I see his behavior, right, and his inability, what I see now is his inability to go beyond his experience.
Mhm.
And I think, boy, he must have suffered a lot because who do you have to be? This is the question that I would ask women who are listening to this. Who does your dad, who did he, if he's not alive, but who did he have to be able to behave in the way that he behaved?
Mhm.
Okay. Because humans are not automatically callous and disinterested and disconnected. That is, in fact, most humans come in as just pure love. When you see the babies, that's why they're so lovely. They're just pure
Mhm.
love. And
Mhm.
then you have to know that there has to be something significant that happens to a soul for them to be distant and disconnected from another living being that
Mhm.
they believe they brought into the world. I mean, sometimes you don't even have to bring them in. There are many men who adopt children or get connected with a woman's child. But if you can't do that and do that well and feel the things that it's normal to feel as a man,
Mhm.
to connect to a soul that you believe you brought into the world, something has to have happened to you
Mhm.
in your process.
Yes.
Something has to have happened.
Yeah.
And I have at this point now great compassion for my dad, which is why I think this conversation is important, because for those women who are still angry at the dad that was never there, and for the dad that never did the things that he should have done, you have to understand that this guy that wasn't able to connect and what didn't feel responsible and didn't show up for you and didn't get the emotional things, something was going on with him
Yeah.
that from before. It's not just right now. If he was whole, he would be able to do the things that you think he should have been able to do. So
Yeah.
how can you be mad at him?
Yes.
How can you be mad at him?
Mm.
What if somebody didn't give it to him?
Mhm.
What if somebody didn't give it
Well,
to him?
one of the things I've seen, that's about number one, Olivia, that's very high level thinking. That's very evolved thinking. And many times I've seen where children form an opinion about their parent
Mm-hmm.
in that first stage of life, those first 20 years. Children form an opinion about their parent and the relationships at that early stage
Mm-hmm.
based on the child's level of consciousness. And what I'll say is this: a lady, a friend, was married, had a husband that was just abusive, had to literally run for her life, but took her
Mm-hmm.
child and ran. And later, to take care of that child, the mother left the child with the grandmother because she had to work, and the
Mm-hmm.
only place she could get a job, with sufficient income
Mm-hmm.
was 150 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would stay somewhere on the week she lived in the town on, and she'd come home on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But in later years, we realized, and when we talked to her, that the child had formed her opinion
Mm-hmm.
based on the child's consciousness at the time when she was being raised. And so in the child's mind, all she knew was her mother was not there.
Yes.
She didn't have any understanding that her mother was not there because she needed to be someplace else to
Mm-hmm.
work so they
Mm-hmm.
would have a house to live in. I
Right.
say, so that you have a house to live in to be
Mm-hmm.
unhappy that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was a breakthrough for the child because as an adult, when this
Put it all
this
together.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this feeling of abandonment was surfacing in different areas
Mm-hmm.
that fortunately they were able to sit back and come to a conclusion and like, okay, now I understand. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really only after that particular child, daughter became a mother.
Right.
Okay, because then you had an analogy now, like now you're the working mother.
Right.
Now you're the one taking care of yeah, your 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
and not only that, you're really a single working mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Now you
so
get it.
now, yeah, but it was a breakthrough for them as a parent and a daughter
Mm-hmm.
to get to that realization. So many times I think the children form a mindset based on that early um that
Perception.
yeah, that early perception.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I like about your book is to explain it in a way that a person can read it now and say, you know what, maybe that's me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe maybe that's why I act the way I act. Maybe that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's the programming I have. I didn't
Mhm.
even know. Half the
Right.
people you don't even know your program, so you
Right.
think it's all right. It's natural.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Exactly. And you
yeah.
know what I wanted to say is that for again for people who are watching, obviously,
Uh-huh.
um, this insight that I'm, sharing now, I didn't have this insight when I was 20 or when I was 30. I'll just stop there.
Yes, okay.
I'm just gonna stop there. Let's just say I didn't have it when I was 20 and I didn't have it when I was 30. For
Uh-huh,
sure, I didn't
uh-huh,
have it. And it was a process, just like you described, you come into certain levels of life. Okay, you get married, you start, oh, I see. Or you
uh,
have a child. Oh, I see.
mhm,
And then you have to make the decision, right? That you're going to work through your issues and your programming once you realize that you have it. But it's not something that just snaps into place and you're good. It's a process to really come to understand. And when I started on my spiritual path, one of the things we said is that you need to spiritualize the intellect, right?
mhm,
So there are different levels that you go through. So you can get the material, right? You can
mm,
actually get the material, but getting the material is not it. Not
mm,
till you own the material and you
mhm,
get the material, does it become yours and then you get it. And then after you get it at that level, now you got to put it into practice,
yes,
right? So
yes,
to be able to say, I totally understand my dad. For example, I think in the book there's a place where I call him, right? I'm getting divorced and I decided, I want to talk to my dad because that's, as a woman, I guess that's what you think you're supposed to do, call your dad, maybe he can help you. But he'd never helped me. He'd never been really present or anything like that. And the idea that I would think that he could do something that he had no capacity, not in a bad way. He just didn't have it.
yeah,
Where would I think? Of course, I understand now, but how could I logically think that I could call him and all of a sudden he was going to turn into somebody that he had never been?
ooh, yes,
He couldn't do it.
yes,
Now I didn't understand, and this is something that I think it's important for women who feel, have this issue with daddy and so on, to really have great compassion for their position.
yes,
I mean, you can be it's normal to be upset and to be angry or whatever, but if you could really, who was this kid? And particularly, I mean, obviously everybody has their issues, but in my case, people of African descent. Your mother has 8 children. You're the oldest boy. first and oldest boy. First child and oldest boy. These people are just working and trying to make it,
Mhm.
right? They need you to work and try to make it. What attention are you getting? What nurturing are you getting?
Mm.
um, who is developing you? And this is not even going back into the DNA, right? We're not
Right,
even
right.
talking about the DNA. We're just talking about this life that you were born into. So how would you all of a sudden turn out to be, and of course personality has something to be the most loving and supportive and present. Now,
Mhm,
just to be clear, there are many people in the world who come into the worst circumstances, right?
mhm.
And turn out to be amazing fathers,
Yeah,
precisely because of their circumstances, right?
yeah.
Because they see what they suffered and therefore they decide. But there's a good proportion of the population that doesn't have that in them. They just came in, this is the thing, I'm going to make it through, and I don't have anything beyond that, right? I don't have anything beyond that to offer. So if you are one of these women and you feel like, and I know some women, I know people who feel cheated, women who feel cheated
Yes,
by the fact that daddy wasn't there.
yes.
But one of the things that might give you solace is the idea that daddy didn't have the ability
Mm.
to do it. You
Yeah,
should, you could consider that. How could he give you what he did not
I
have?
have.
Now, whose fault is that?
Yeah,
Okay, well, it's his parents' fault, right? That they didn't create a whole man. Okay,
mhm.
well, whose fault is that? Well,
Uh-huh.
it's their parents' fault.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then whose fault is that? Uh, so there has to be a line, right? There has to be a cut and a
yeah.
healing,
Yes.
because the generational chain of who's responsible for where
Uh-huh.
many people of African descent, many men and many women find themselves,
Mhm.
is something that has to be cut and healed.
Mm. Now, let me ask you a question. As you were sharing that, I could see that there was just great understanding.
Hmm.
Now, back to that time when you're like 20 years old or 30 years old, before you have this understanding,
Yes.
how does this relationship with your dad or dad, how does that now impact how you deal with other men?
I don't think it's possible for it not to impact how you
Mm,
deal with other men. I think it absolutely impacts how you deal with other men, even when you don't realize that it's impacting, your interactions, your
mhm,
relationships. And I'll give you one example that I learned about myself later.
mhm,
Um, my dad, and there's a story in the book, I don't know where it is exactly at this moment, but my dad had this thing. He did care about Christmas, right?
mhm,
And so he would come and he would bring us stuff for Christmas. Like, I
mhm,
don't know what their deal was, my mom and him, but anyway, he would bring stuff, just any
mhm.
stuff, but stuff, something was
Yeah,
better than nothing, right?
yeah.
And then he would say he was coming for dinner. And my mom would send me to ask him, "Are you coming for dinner?" He said, "Yeah, I'm coming for dinner." And I lived in Washington, D.C. while my mother went to what was then the District of Columbia Teachers College,
Mhm,
and it's now the University of the District of Columbia. And we're like living right in the hood in DC, right?
mhm,
And so we go back to Panama, and she thinks that he is going to come back. I believe that's what she
mhm.
thinks. So she sends me to ask him, "Are you coming for dinner?" Yes. I'm like, 10, 11,
Yeah,
12, all the way till I was 17.
yeah.
Okay. And every single year
Uh-huh.
I asked my dad, "Are you coming for dinner?" "Yes, I'm coming." My brother and I are all excited because he's coming for dinner. And my mom makes a scandal. She always was a great cook, and she cooked every single year. Even if he didn't show up, she cooked for us.
Uh-huh.
And every single Christmas, he did not show up.
Ooh.
Every single Christmas, he never came.
Mhm.
My brother and I would fall asleep on the sofa or whatever, watching TV. And then every now and then we'd hear a sound and we think maybe that's him. And that happened
Mm.
from 10 until 17 until we came back and to South Florida. Every single year. And then my mom would say, which she knows, she's acknowledged that she's at fault with this issue of having me in the middle. She'd say, go and ask your father why he didn't come, right?
Mm. Yes.
So now I go in and say, Daddy, da 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 da. You know what he said? It's in the book. There's 12 days to Christmas. I still have time. Every single
Mm.
year, he
Mm.
said the same thing.
Mhm.
And every single year,
Yeah.
the 12 days came and went, and he never came.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I am hypersensitive in relationships to a guy who says something and doesn't do it.
Ooh. Yes.
Now, it could be nothing, right? It could be nothing. It could be just he's just being stupid, or he's just, he's young, maybe,
Uh-huh.
a little irresponsible, but it's not the
Uh-huh.
end of the world. He just
Yeah.
failed on some relativity. But to me,
Uh-huh.
don't tell me you're coming and you don't come.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Don't tell me you're calling and you don't
Yeah.
call, because
Oh, yeah.
it's big.
Yeah.
That's a little tiny
Yeah.
example
Yes.
that I didn't realize when I
Yeah.
was growing up that that was a thing,
Yeah.
right? Can't take the instability, right? Yes,
Uh-huh.
no, maybe no,
Uh-huh.
can't do
Uh-uh.
that because I've had too much,
Wow.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
hypersensitive to that.
Yeah.
I need somebody who is going to be 100% every single time, which is
Yeah.
impossible, by the way.
Right. 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 Right.
Okay?
But you built that up during that period because that was, and see that period, everything is so impressionable.
Yes.
I mean, it's like burning a brand there
Yes.
that really, woo, yeah. That's
Repeatedly,
yeah. Yeah.
not one time,
Yeah.
multiple years,
Years. Yeah.
multiple years. And, I think as a function of my personality,
Uh-huh.
because I've always been very hopeful,
Uh-huh.
so I go the first year, like, okay, the
Mhm.
second year, maybe this year,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
next year,
Yeah. Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he thought,
Uh-huh.
but he obviously didn't think very much of it,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, I cannot imagine lying to my son
Yes.
or disappointing him in any way
Hey,
if it was
yeah.
within my control.
Yes.
Because I would feel, oh my God, how could I do this to,
Yeah.
first of all, a little boy, right? If
Yeah.
it was a little boy.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, even more so,
Yeah.
I don't want to, life is already challenging. Why
Yeah.
would you add to that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead. No.
Yeah. Well, as you were sharing that, and I was thinking of him, it, the way he was raised, his parents, him being the oldest one,
Hmm.
and probably being the oldest one, he was always the one asked to sacrifice, to go
Yes.
through this, for the other kids. And so I think once again, those lessons learned at those early ages are like burned there in your spirit,
Right.
but burned at the level of consciousness that you had at the time.
Absolutely.
But then they're
Absolutely.
burned there and you carry them. As you said, things buried alive never die. I love that.
Absolutely.
So you
Absolutely.
carry that with you now.
Yes.
And so I can see a man meeting you and saying, "I'll pick you up at 5 o'clock."
Yes. Yes.
And he gets hung up in traffic and I mean has the greatest excuses in the world,
Yes.
but
And
it's like,
it's,
yeah, I ain't hearing it.
yes, exactly. Completely like,
Wow.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
because this speaks to me of things that happened, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. It
yeah.
just, it just did. And, it's, my dad actually told me that and there's a story, and I don't want to tell this one in detail
Uh-huh.
because it's a very deep story. But
Mhm.
basically, told me what exactly what you said,
Mhm.
that he had sacrificed so much of
Mhm.
himself for everybody else, and
Mhm.
now it was essentially about him.
Yeah.
That he
Yes.
told me that in so many words.
Yes.
Now, for all those people who are out there, there are many people who have been the first son, the first
Yeah.
daughter, and have had to sacrifice and didn't behave in that way,
Mhm.
right? But for whoever he was, whatever his experience was, his choice was like, well, I never got anything and I had to give up for everybody else. So now I'm going to make this about me. Well,
Wow.
you could do that, right? But
Mhm.
that is going to have consequences as well. You don't,
Yeah.
you don't, you don't get away from, because if you once you have children or a
Yeah.
child, you don't get away because you were poor you, right?
Mhm.
That you were the first child and you suffered this burden, and now you can just say, well, I don't care whether I have children or not, or whether I have responsibilities or not, I'm just going to do me.
Me.
You don't get to do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that also has other consequences
Consequences. Yeah.
that are going to
Yeah.
befall you,
Yeah.
because that's just how life is. Maybe the point of you having difficult experiences is for you to become a stronger person,
Yeah.
to become a bigger person. And then life sort of turns around and blesses you.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Just as you were talking, you mentioned something in the book about the baggage underneath, and I was thinking of a plane. When you're on a plane, you really never know how much baggage is under the belly of the
Mhm, mhm,
plane.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I was once on a plane, and they literally came back to the runway, and they said they had to take some baggage off. The weight was
mhm,
too much.
mhm,
Another time I was on a plane, they had to come back to redistribute the baggage. I guess it had been
mhm,
put on, and but anyway, I was just thinking that so many of us are like planes flying in the sky of life,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
not knowing the baggage we have down in our bellies, in the
Absolutely.
underneath our
Absolutely.
foundation.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And this baggage then controls our lives from that point on.
And you don't even know.
And you
You
don't
don't
even
even
know.
know.
Yeah.
No. And the baggage is energy, right?
Mhm.
And so you'll say, well, why do I keep attracting these experiences? Because the baggage is underneath with that energy, and
Yes.
then you're attracting it and you don't even understand why until you
Yes.
go and look underneath. and
Yes.
and part of the reason in this chapter that I call it things buried alive never die was because I was looking specifically, and I really wanted to have an opportunity to talk about this. Now,
Mhm.
I don't know for sure
Mhm.
what made my dad the way that he was, but I
Mhm.
can tell you this: I know a whole bunch of men from my community of African descent, and I know a whole bunch of men in my current community of African descent that smack off. You all never got over being a breeder.
Yes.
Smack. I'm not
Yeah.
saying if it's not
Yeah.
you, it's not you, but your behavior, if you think you can go here and have a baby, and you can go there and have a baby, and you can go over there and have a baby, and never look back,
Mhm.
there is some program under there running you.
Yeah.
And one time I heard a guy say, "Oh, I think he said I'm African, not really African, but
Mhm.
here in America, right? I'm African, and Africans do this, and they have a lot of children, and they have a lot of women." And I said to him, "Listen, under the old African system where men had multiple wives and multiple children, you know what you had to have? Assets.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You can't just do that.
Uh-huh.
You had to have assets, and there was a system. There was a family system that was well organized. Even if you had multiple wives and
Yeah.
multiple children, you had a system,
Yeah.
and you had to have money. You just don't have a whole bunch of women and don't have nothing to give,
Mhm.
because those are your children. And the groups and the tribes would not have survived and done well for hundreds of thousands of years if people were just having a child here and gone and another,
Mhm.
that's not what they did.
Yes, yes.
What we have here is, and I say this in the book, the movie Avatar, the first one,
Mhm.
there's a line where the guy says, I'm going to make a hole in their DNA so huge that it'll take them centuries to
Mm.
fix it or recover or whatever the case might be. And I think that that is what has happened, because when you took these people from, let's say, the west coast of Africa with a culture and a history and social values and the way that they had their system, you cut that. I mean,
Yes.
it's like dropping you in the air because you
Yes.
have nothing. You have nothing and you have to rebuild yourself. Well, okay. And talking about slavery, and I'll say this now in case I forget, one of the things that I think that if you are unhealed, particularly if you're a person of African descent in any proportion, um, I think that we need to forgive slavery,
Mhm.
just like you forgive anything else, because otherwise you're carrying it, right? You're
Mhm.
carrying the anger, you're carrying the resentment. But, and that is a whole thing in and of itself,
Yeah.
because, like, just like we were saying a minute ago, everything is energy.
Yes.
Everything is energy. If you're carrying that energy, that's what's going to show up in your life.
Yes. Yes.
And the part of the purpose of the book is to let go of the baggage. And one of the things in the baggage is this history of slavery, which we carry
Mhm.
from generation in that invisible way, from generation to one generation to the other.
Mhm.
And so you bring these people over here and you drop them. How are they going to figure life out from zero?
Mhm.
And to be honest, I think people of African descent did an amazing job. I mean, you can go anywhere in the Americas where they were. They
Mhm.
picked up the language. How do you pick up a language when you don't speak that language at all and you don't
Mhm.
get to go to school?
Mhm.
Nobody's going to teach you. So you pick up a language, you create a language, you figure out the food to the best of your ability, a number of different things. So really did an amazing thing. But then now we get into this modern era. The question is, as we look back, what are the effects that remain? What effects remain? And one of them I see is this issue of fatherhood.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, when I was doing our book, Solving the Race Issue in America, we did some research on, we call it the 100th monkey.
Mhm, yes,
Yes.
I have it right
And
here. Solving
yes,
the,
yes,
yes.
solving the race issue in America,
Mhm.
and just how behaviors are passed down. And it's not just genetically, but there's, as you say, everything is energy.
Right.
And so knowledge and behaviors are represent energy. And
Mhm.
just the essence of those experiments during that period was that behaviors developed under a particular system does not, even though you may not personally have been a slave,
Right.
but just behaviors be developed in a particular species
Mhm.
spread throughout that species.
Absolutely.
And so when we look at, as you said, when the slaves were brought here, they were taken from their culture, but then the system attempted to reprogram them
Mhm.
in a way that valued the sperm of the man
Yes.
and the womb of the woman.
Mhm.
And so, therefore, it was supported, encouraged. So, to
Mhm.
have a man, a black man who impregnated as many women as possible, that became an investment.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at the price, yeah, people don't realize how big a financial, the price of a slave was as much as the price of a house.
Yes.
You know,
Mhm.
they would
Mhm.
offer $1,000 to return a particular slave, and you
Mhm.
could buy a whole farm for $200.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it was an economic system in
Mhm.
which that was encouraged. And one of the things when you were saying things buried alive never die. Behaviors
Yes.
that are incorporated into your consciousness
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate themselves.
Absolutely. And repeat and repeat and repeat until they're brought up to be healed.
And that's it.
And one of the things that along those same lines, I think you probably saw it in this chapter, was about eating,
Yes.
right? I mean, my grandmother, she loves some cow foot and some tripe and some
Uh-huh.
pig's
Yeah.
feet, and the rice had to be cooked with pigtail,
Uh-huh.
and a whole bunch of food that I would not even is not within my no, I'm not
Uh-huh.
having it. Okay,
Yes.
now that comes from you get the
Mm.
leftovers, right?
Yes.
And again, I think people of African descent did an amazing job because you could take some pig parts, the worst parts, and make it taste delicious, right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
what they did. They made it taste
Yes.
delicious.
Yeah.
So good. But now we don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
That was all you had. And we
Yes.
can cut that program, see what it is, because and you have to be careful because sometimes people say, well, that's part of my culture. Well,
Yeah.
no, it's not part of your
Yeah.
culture. It was what you had to do to survive.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
we're past that. And that's just one example of what you're saying, how things
Yeah.
get passed on. Now it's incorporated. And if
Yeah.
you don't, you got to have some ham hocks and
Yeah.
the collard greens. I mean,
Yeah.
why do you have to have ham
Yeah.
hocks and the collard
Yeah.
greens? You don't
Yeah.
have to. You can have
Yeah.
collard greens. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to have ham hocks in it.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have to eat chitlins. You don't have to eat tripe. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do those things because you're not in that economic position anymore.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the same thing with this issue. I mean, I saw an article the other day about slave farms. So they had
Uh,
women, and then the men would go and, impregnate the women. And just looking around, there's no scientific data to
uh-huh.
support it, but you have to see that when some of these guys go around and they are just boom, 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 with no emotional connection, is something
Mhm.
has to be cut. Something
Yeah.
has been cut. And
Yeah.
I think I say in the book, one of the things that I think might have happened, because this happened so much. We can't even imagine the number of times it happened.
Yeah.
But imagine you're a slave, black male. You find, another a slave, a woman, and you're happy. You're having your family, and then what does a master do?
Tear it
Break,
apart. Yes.
break, over and over and again. So
Yeah.
what do? You're like, okay, fine. I'm not going to connect with anybody, right?
Yes.
Because as a man, you've lost all your power.
Yes.
You have no power.
Yes.
So the best way to protect yourself is never to connect,
Never to
right?
connect. Well,
And then
yeah.
that is exactly what you just said,
Mhm.
because now the next generation sees this man who says, I'm never going to connect. He starts not connecting either, but he doesn't
Uh-huh.
know why.
Yeah. Exactly. You just see the behavior because so much of it is imitation. But I was thinking about this. As a man, when you're in the slave environment,
Hmm.
and number one, when you see your family taken away, okay. When you're taught to go and have children and know that you cannot be attached.
Right,
If you're attached to those children, if you had any desire to protect them, that could be your death.
right,
And,
right.
s- and so for 300 years, basically, black men have been taught to make babies and
And
don't
not
be attached to nothing.
right, right. And you have to realize that that's what's going on. That's
Yes,
the thing.
yes,
You have to realize, just like you were saying earlier, you have to realize that that's the program running you.
yes, yes,
And the unfortunate thing about that is, and I think about my dad, in this sense, is the loss that you suffer as
yes.
a result of not being able to properly connect, to
Uh-huh.
build relationships. I mean, I think if I had had a relationship with my dad, he would have, I would have adored him.
Yes,
Like, You know, even now, I think you can't detect because I say daddy all the time.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
daddy, daddy, daddy. I would have been, you know, and also I think I'm funny, okay? And I
Yeah.
think he would have gotten a few laughs from how
Yeah.
funny I am
Yes.
and also how much I'm like him.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
like somebody, a friend of mine saw one of my videos and his friend, one of my dad's friends saw one of the videos and he goes, you even used your hands just like your dad, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
And I think, oh, wow, what a loss to him
Yes. Yes.
as a man. And that's, I
Yes.
think, something that I wish that men would get. You know, you're not getting away with anything, and being a father is a very big job, a very responsible job, but what you lose
Yes.
by not being able to come into yourself as a father, what you lose
Mm.
is something really incredible. And in a way, I don't want to say I feel sorry, but I have great compassion, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the circumstances that placed him where he was so that he could not benefit from
Mm-hmm.
having a daughter or daughters who loved him wildly and would have had adored him till the day he died.
Well, when we go back to that slave paradigm, all
Mhm,
of that, the thing that made the slave system work
mhm.
was the ability of the black male to create more slaves.
Yes.
And the paradigm around that was to, there was a section in solving the race issue in America where the some of the slave processes to teach slave behavior.
Mhm, mhm,
And one of the important aspects of it was that when you punished a slave to demonstrate a behavior you should not
mhm,
entertain, you
mhm.
made sure to have the women and all the children present
Yes,
so that
yes.
they understood that if you do this,
Right.
you're going to die.
Yes.
And I think what the human mind does when you look at the limitations, the structures that are created around you, it's like eating what do you call it, chitlins,
Right.
that if this is all you have, then the human mind must say it is good in order
Right.
for you to continue.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You got to
you
explain it to yourself and you got to
yes.
have a good justification.
Yeah.
Mhm,
And so many of our beliefs now are based on these justifications that no
mhm.
longer exist. We don't have to
Yes.
eat chitlins, but we
Yes.
convince ourselves that, and then, if you don't eat chitlins, you don't have any soul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the worst part right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the worst part right there. That they're like judging you because you're like, oh, so now you don't eat chitlins. Now you don't
Uh-huh.
right. Now you
Yeah.
don't eat this.
Yeah.
Now like you just like big time now.
Yeah.
No, I think that the slaves would be like, really? You guys are still eating that? We
Yeah.
we ate it because
Yeah.
we had
We
to.
didn't have no choice. A story we tell sometimes about a Thanksgiving dinner, and the little girl was watching her mom bake the ham.
Mhm,
And so the mom cut the ends of the ham off and put it in the pot. So the little girl says, Mom, why do you cut the ends of the ham off? She said, because that's what my mom did. It makes it
mhm,
better flavored.
mhm,
So later that day, the grandmother comes over and the little girl says, Grandma, mom was telling me you cut the ends of the ham off. Why did you cut the ends of the ham off? And the grandma said, well, because it made it taste better. And that's what my mother did.
mhm,
So later that evening, they go to see the great grandmother at the nursing home, and the little girl says, "Great grandma, my mom says, and my grandma, why did you cut the ends of the ham off to make the ham taste better?"
mhm.
She said, "No, I cut the ends of the ham off because the pot was too small."
Learned behavior, right?
Okay,
Learned
yeah,
behavior
and
with
so
no logical explanation.
explanation. I'll give you another interesting example, Olivia. One of Sandra's cousins had polio.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the cousin, she had the braces on her leg. So years later, we were at the grocery store and a young lady came over and I was looking at how she walked and Sandra said, "Well, that's so and so's daughter." I said, "Oh, wow." I said, "She had polio too, huh?" She said, "No, she didn't have polio."
Mm.
But the little girl saw her mother walk with
Oh,
the braces. And so she walked exactly the same way with no braces.
what? That's
Yes,
deep.
that's deep.
That is
It's deep.
deep,
Yeah.
deep, deep. Wow,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
something. That's really something.
yeah.
That's how things can get passed on,
Yes, yeah.
And I think you probably saw in the book, there was I had a little bit of a discussion about the alteration of DNA because
Mhm.
there's a lot of work going on now about how DNA
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
changed and the fact that traumas can be programmed into
The
your DNA.
DNA. Yes, yes,
And so you have it happening at a genetic level as
yes,
well as a social level
yes,
in
yes.
a number of different ways. And it is what it is. And sometimes when I think about slavery, I think, listen, first of all, and this is where forgiveness comes in. First of all, aside from forgiving, let's say, Europeans for slavery, I
Mhm.
think people of African descent have to forgive Africans for slavery. Because
Yes,
the truth of the matter is that if the Africans weren't bringing those people out to the coast,
yes,
Europeans weren't going in to get them.
yes,
So that's kind of a big part of the thing. But humans have been enslaving each other for from the time and still to
yeah,
today.
yeah,
And it used to be if you were in a war, you capture the people and
yeah,
you they become your slaves.
yeah,
In America, it became a little bit different because it became solely about sort of like the race of the people,
yes,
the look of the people, that they were dark skin or black skin or whatever the case might be, and subjugating them. So
yes,
that became a whole
yeah,
different things. But
yeah,
humans have always done this to each other. The
yeah,
thing is, when are we going to get the consciousness
yeah,
not to do it
yes,
to anybody else? And if you're a person of African descent, what do you need to happen for you to get over it and not because in the past you did it to me and then I did it to you,
yes,
right? So
yes,
now we're done with that. So
yeah,
what is it going to be? It's not going to be you're going to enslave somebody else.
yeah. Mhm.
It has to be some other answer. It
Well,
has to be a healing and a
mhm,
change in consciousness for everybody.
yeah,
And I'll tell you this this is semi political.
mm,
A lot of people in America are scared because people of African descent are advancing and this and that and the other. And maybe in a subconscious way, the fear is that the people of African descent would behave the same way if they were on top.
yes,
So, what we need is a change in consciousness
yes,
so that even if I was a descendant of a slave, you know that I'm not going to get to a certain level and then turn on you
yeah,
because that's how we functioned up
yeah,
until now. That's what we did.
yeah. Well, that's, kind of the European mindset. I mean, that
Yes.
you always, whoever's in power, they captured and they took over. I think interesting of, there's always been worldwide slavery, but I think in America, slavery became such an economic institution.
Yes. Yes.
America is a capitalistic society.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always about the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so whatever whatever systems or programs are imposed with the idea of perpetuating the money.
Absolutely.
You
I have to say, not just America, because many
yeah,
European countries, if you look at
yeah,
England and
yeah, yeah,
sometimes when I've been to Europe and I see, sometimes I
yeah,
see the amount of gold and resources from the Americas, I was like,
yeah,
did they
yeah,
leave anything over there, or is it
yeah,
all over here in Europe? The
yes,
same if you look in the museums in Europe.
Yeah.
Did they leave anything in Africa? Is there
Yeah.
anything left?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
all over
All
here.
over the place. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say this. I want to say this on behalf of Africans so that we are honest with each other.
Uh-huh.
Africans have enslaved other Africans
Yes.
for
Yeah. Yeah.
this is not, it's not just that Europeans did it.
Yeah.
Everybody did it. Native American tribes did it to each other.
Yeah.
Everybody was capable of doing it.
Yeah.
That is why now Native Americans enslaved African Americans.
Hmm.
There were Native Americans who were slaves there were African Americans who were slaves to Native Americans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to be honest
Hmm.
about this whole situation. And we have to have the ability, and we're talking about dads, particularly at this particular point. And I go off in this direction because you got to wake up, you got to realize what the programs are that are running you, and you got to heal this issue. And if you believe, I mean, because we're having our discussion, but if you believe that this in you as a man is coming in any way from the transatlantic slave trade, you need to bring that up, take a
Yeah.
look at it,
Yes.
expose it to the light so it can be healed.
Yeah.
That's what we're really talking about. And that's why um, it's important. That's why talking about the slave trade, I mean, everybody's not behaving the way they behave because of that. But there's
Hmm.
a good proportion. And all you have to do is look at it. Is this the
Yeah.
case for me?
Yeah.
Is it the case for me? And then once you have that, now you can, as a man, as a father, maybe even as an absent father, maybe you weren't there, but you
Yeah.
could say to yourself, man, I didn't realize
Hmm.
that this was what I was doing.
Hmm.
And now I have all these children and I haven't, you know, done anything to lay a good foundation for them. What do I do now?
Hmm.
Well, you first thing you always have to do is to forgive yourself,
Yes.
right? That's the whole thing. You got to forgive yourself. And then hopefully your daughter or maybe your daughters and sons are in a place where they would be able to forgive you.
Mm. Well, Olivia, my relationship, my daughter's name is Olivia, and I am very thankful that she was a late life daughter
Mm-hmm.
because I knew a lot more as a late life dad than I did as a young dad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I didn't know anything. When I look back, I was just the only thing he was interested in was having fun.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
having some money at a young age gave me like great possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But with my daughter, as a late life daughter, and to be honest enough with her, because like a lot of the things you're saying about your dad, I'm sure she said about me.
Mm-hmm.
As an absent father,
Mm-hmm.
and her mother remarried and married, and there was some real challenging times, but we were in a position to work through them
Mm-hmm.
to get to that point now where, you know, as they say, she has forgiven me, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I have forgiven me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we have evolved into a real powerful relationship. And one of the keys was to make a commitment to never leave angry.
Mm-hmm.
That, when she said some very harsh things, we always continued to relate. We may be traveling,
Mm-hmm.
and we always did road trips every year from the time
Mm-hmm.
she was maybe 12. We did
Mm-hmm.
road trips every summer. We'd go at least a couple weeks on the road, travel, just her and I.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that hostility came out over those years, those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took us years to work through it. eh, But
That's yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it took us
Mm-hmm.
years to work through it. And so as I look, we're at Father's Day and say, well, now this is a lot of good ideas, a lot of good discussion. What are some of the things that we can do going forward
Mhm.
as first as black fathers? And white people have their own other. Years ago I did a workshop and I was talking about mothers.
Mhm.
And when you do workshops, especially when you do like workshops with white, black, Hispanic, with all different, a very diverse audience, you have to be very
Mhm.
careful about.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I had thought, that motherhood was one of those things, since I had done a whole piece on nurturing
Mhm.
and mother and
Mhm.
love, etc. And this one fella came up, a white guy. He said, "Well, that was not my mother. My mother was the meanest." I mean, he went into it like, whoa. And it made me realize that everybody, all of the trauma, you can't perpetuate trauma without experiencing trauma. You just get a
Mhm.
different side of that.
Yes.
There's a slave paradigm, but there's also
Mhm.
a slave master paradigm.
Yes, yes, there absolutely is. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think we as people of African descent have
yeah,
to understand that. Like,
yeah,
most white people don't get up in the morning to
uh,
be racist and evil. They have their
right.
own life and their own issues that they're dealing with, just
Yes,
like every single human. Now,
yeah,
because you come into the world as a person of African descent, you're going to
mhm,
have a special bag. You have
yeah,
a little extra in your bag
yeah.
that you have to deal with. But there, we have no monopoly on
No,
trauma and
no,
challenges.
no. So,
Okay?
and one of
Nobody
the
gets
things,
away free.
yeah, one of the things I think as a message for this Father's Day,
Hmm.
the first step to me appears to be to acknowledge it.
Yes, I
To,
think so.
yeah,
Yes. And that's,
to
let me pause. Let me have you pause right there for everybody's, any guys that are watching,
mhm,
to take a deep breath. I acknowledge that I wasn't there.
mhm,
I acknowledge that I wasn't the best father I could have been. I was talking to somebody and I was like, the person was arguing about some, as a father, arguing about an issue. And I said to the person, but you weren't there. You
mhm,
just weren't there. You weren't there when the kindergarten. You weren't there for the sixth grade graduation. You
mhm,
weren't there for middle school. You weren't there for high school. Whatever you might think about the mother,
mhm.
you weren't there. And that's something that you have to go, that's a thing. Kids
Yeah,
have to eat every day. Kids
yes,
have to be spoken to. They have to do homework. They have to have things to do. I mean, there's so much. And if you're not there, you're missing a big part.
yeah,
And it's a whole thing. You have to acknowledge that.
yes, yes,
And you should be. In many cases, I find some men are kind of like vicious with the woman who raised their child.
uh-huh,
And there may be good reasons for it, but
mhm,
geez, you have to be grateful that
yeah,
you weren't ready to do it and that this woman did the best that she could.
yes, yes,
That's a whole thing.
yes,
Right
yeah,
behind.
yeah, yes, yes, yes. And Olivia, I think I never could understand anger, angry people, mean people. And I think once you acknowledge then that other to take anger out of it,
Mm-hmm.
to when you said about how a man is so angry with the mother of his children,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and as long as that anger is there, you're not going to get anywhere. That's
No
yeah,
way.
that anger is like you on the plane that is your life. You have a great big lead tank in your
Wait,
baggage compartment,
wait.
and you spend your whole life running around on the runway of life. You're burning fuel and propellers turning,
Can't get anywhere.
and
Can't get
you can't
anywhere.
get anywhere because that anger keeps
Mm-hmm.
you down so deep that you can't
Mm-hmm.
get beyond it. And so
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge, and then acknowledge the anger and handle the anger. Remove that
Yes.
anger. You know.
Yes, you have to heal it. You have to
Mm.
figure out how you're going to remove it because it's an energy in you,
Yes.
wherever it comes from, whether it's coming generationally or from a particular experience. Your job is to heal it, to
Mm.
remove it from your physical body
Mhm.
so that it's no longer holding you
You
back and holding you down and attracting more negative, angry experiences into your life.
say yes.
And I
Because
think we need
yes.
therapy.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's hard to, as they often say, think outside the box. When you're in the box, you can't think outside. It's
No,
hard to think outside of
no,
the box.
no,
Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah.
But
You have to be.
everybody's not ready, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
if this conversation is hitting you in any way,
Yes.
and you have to work from where you are, right? Maybe you don't have money for therapy, but you could buy a book,
Mhm.
you could read a book,
Yeah.
you could figure out what ways can I find that will help me release the anger that I
Yeah.
have for
Yeah.
free,
Yeah.
right? What can you can't buy the book? Okay, Google it. How do
Yeah.
I heal anger
Yes.
in me? But
Yes.
the thing is that you have to make the decision
Yes.
that you want to be well, and you have to be willing to do the work.
Ooh. Mm. Yes.
You got to be willing to do the work. Nobody's going to come down and save you. You want to do the work to be whole. And of course, all this we're coming in talking about from a
Mhm.
spiritual perspective. We're not just saying, "Oh, you're going to heal yourself." No, we're
Mhm.
talking about connecting on a spiritual level, help having God help you to heal yourself, giving you the insight,
Mhm.
the faith, the for whatever it is that you need to do,
Yeah.
so that you can then do what you need to
You
do,
need
so
to
you
do.
can be a whole person.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot. It's not easy, especially dealing with it from the African American experience or from the perspective of people of African descent in the Americas. I'll tell you a story. My son went with his friends. I think it was for his bachelor party. He
Mm.
went to Colombia. So it's like five black males. They're in Colombia. They're having a great time. He called me. He said, "You know what, Mom? We went to the bank, and you know how these," and I didn't ask him anything, this is him telling me. He
Uh-huh.
says, "You know how you have the little booth where you go into the ATM?" He said, "All five of us were in the booth, and a Spanish lady came into the booth." And he said, "And she wasn't scared."
Wow. Mhm.
And he said, "You know what? If I was in America,"
Uh-huh.
she had seen five black men in the booth,
Yeah. Yeah.
she was never coming in. And that's what stuck out in his mind.
Yes. Yes.
That's what he called me and told me.
Yeah.
So neither you nor I are saying that these things are easy, right?
Mhm.
We're not saying that this is easy. There's a lot to it, but we
Yes.
are saying that there is a path to healing.
Wow.
There is a path to healing.
Wow.
And one of the things that I think helps a lot is when you are able to travel and you go outside of the United States, because there's a way that America has a way. Listen, I want to tell you this. I was not born here. I'm an American citizen, but I wasn't born here. And America has a way with race of just weighing in on you. It just weighs down on you. You don't
Yeah.
even know when somebody is, if the nicest thing would be for somebody to be unkind to you for
Yeah.
no other reason than who you are. But
Right.
then when somebody's unkind to you because you're black, what are you
Yeah.
supposed to do? Unblack
Yeah.
yourself? You
Yeah.
don't know what to do.
Yes.
So it's a significant weight when people are kind to you. Let's say, for purposes of discussion, let's say a white person is kind to you,
Mhm.
right? In America, you don't know why. You're like, are you for, are you just, are you serious? Are you
Mhm.
really being, are you, what is it? So it
Yeah.
is a weight. It is
Yes.
a thing. And sometimes when you leave America, you go somewhere else and you
Yeah.
feel a relief.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So this is not easy stuff that
Yeah.
we're talking about. And just because I've gotten to this place in understanding and consciousness and all the different things that we talk about,
Yes.
doesn't mean that we are like, oh, no,
Mm. Yeah.
it is a challenge.
It's a
I
challenge.
want you to know, for the guys that are listening, that there's a story at the end of the book where I had a dream about my dad. And what I wanted more than anything is for him to know that despite everything that happened, everything
Mhm.
that he did wrong, that I loved him and that he could have peace for all eternity. Just
Yeah.
go forward and know that you're not going to hear anything from me other
Mhm.
than I love you,
Love
daddy.
you. Yeah.
And that's that. Not
Wow.
an easy place to get to.
Mhm.
Not saying that it's easy. Many women are angry. Many women are bitter. Many women are resentful because what happens is that this happens to you and then your life gets more complicated. You
Yes.
pick the wrong guy. You
Yes.
have children with the wrong guy. You don't get your education where you want it to be. And now it's sort of all his fault in
Yes.
your mind, but
Yes.
not really.
Wow. Well, I tell you, Olivia, this is we've had
Sir.
an incredible program today, and as I was thinking there some closing thoughts.
Yes, sir.
One closing thought I'd like to share is that this Father's Day
Mm-hmm.
to call your children,
Mm-hmm.
the mothers of your children, and just say I love you.
Amen.
You know.
Amen. And for some of them, I think they have to say thank you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, because they listen, you know what? At some circumstances, I was an idiot. I really was. I was young and
Uh-huh.
stupid.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I love you and thank
And
you.
thank you. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Any other closing thoughts you'd like to give our fathers on this Father's Day and the mothers who are wondering what to do this Father's Day?
Well, I think you said an interesting thing and that was about the hostility.
Hmm.
Um, I know our time is running out, but my dad came for when I graduated from law school. He actually came to the graduation. That was the only graduation he ever came to.
Okay.
And so anyway, we did the graduation. Whatever, we're having a party, and we were talking about some table or some foolishness that needed to be done.
Hmm.
And I guess in my mind at that time, he had the unmitigated gall
Hmm.
to offer a suggestion. And from some place deep in my soul, there are a few of these stories in the book, someplace
Uh-huh.
deep in my soul and onto my tongue, I said, like, I didn't say, who are you? But it was kind of like, well, you haven't been here anyway. What do
Uh-huh.
you have to say about anything? Like
Uh-huh.
out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
Like, poor guy.
Uh-huh.
Again, poor
Uh-huh.
guy. Because here he is and everything's cool. And then all of a sudden, I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
why do you think you need to offer your opinion about
Uh-huh.
anything? You haven't been here
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. He
Wow.
couldn't have seen it coming in a
Yeah.
million years.
Uh-huh.
And he just turned and walked away.
Wow.
Now, what you said is important because, if you're a dad and you're listening to us and you say, well, I want to reach out and I'm going to try. And then you got to know that there might be something coming your way.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And
Yes.
you got to be willing to do what you said, which
Yeah.
is kind of hang in there. And yeah, she's gonna
Yeah.
be mad, even if she doesn't know
Yeah.
she's mad. She's gonna be mad. I was like, girl,
Uh-huh.
what you come over here talking about? What I should do at
Yeah.
the table?
Yeah.
You haven't
Yeah.
been here. You haven't helped me. You haven't done anything. So how
Uh-huh.
you come over here trying to tell me which table and da 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 da?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He was smart
Wow.
enough to just turn and walk away.
Yeah.
Never
Wow.
said a word. And we never
Yeah.
talked about it again. So, dads, if you're willing to try, realize that it's a process
Yes.
and it's not going to be snap.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Well, Olivia, we got to do a part two. I mean, whenever we get together, there's
Yes.
so many thoughts that I know, like higher level thoughts that when you think them, when you hear them, when they resound with you, and they touch something inside you, and like, man, I need to really look at that. I
Mm-hmm.
need to look at that.
I hope
Eh,
so. I really
yeah,
hope so. And I think
yeah,
that's the concept that we wanted for
yes,
this recording. And I don't know how long it's gone, but maybe we have to present it in part one and part two.
yeah,
But that's the concept. Listen, I'm a person who's had this experience in my bones. And I'm
yeah,
the daughter that you maybe haven't seen or you weren't there for. And I'm just telling you, it's possible for you to heal,
mhm,
and it's possible for you to help her
mhm,
heal. Even when she
yeah,
says things like, "Who do you think you are?" and you haven't been
yeah,
here anyway, and yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
That's
well,
just that little girl talking.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That's it, and that's a key point that very often the voice you hear is not the voice of who you are right now, but it's the
No.
voice of who you were before.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So be brave because it'll heal you as a man. It will heal you because when you
yes,
stand up on your 2 feet and you said, "Yes, I made a mistake."
yes,
And yes, there are consequences for those mistakes. And I know you have suffered.
yes,
Okay, because I talk about suffering in the book all the time. There's no question I suffered.
yeah. Wow.
Okay, but you as a man,
Yes,
if you just
yes,
call, and she might be like all crazy and saying all
yeah,
kinds of crazy stuff, but
yeah,
you know that you got it out,
yes,
that I was
yes,
wrong.
and you work through it. Wow.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia. Thank
Thank
you, our
you.
audience. We have
Hmm.
enjoyed this, and I know that this is going to be a healing and a blessing
I
to
hope
some
so.
special people who need to hear this message.
Yes, you can
Yes.
love your daddy. You can love your daddy again.
All right, my dear. Thank you so much.
All
And
right,
so
thank you.
we close now saying that the thoughts we shared today, the information we shared today is designed to help you see another version of you, a bigger version of you, and to help you become the person that you were created to be. And so
Amen.